Welcome to our final session in this 2021 kind of virtual speaker session for the USITCC. I am Mark Grimes. I'm the contest coordinator for the USITCC and have been since the inception in 2018. Then for about 7 years before that was the contest coordinator for the AITP National Collegiate Conference. And then for 7 or 8 years before that, managed a couple of different contests and have run the network and server infrastructure for the competitions for that entire period of time. So have been around this quite a bit and seen a lot of changes to the way the competitions run and the conference as a whole runs. I've seen new competitions come into play and some go away as technologies and interests and things like that have changed. So I've seen a lot of things here, and I think at this point, after many years of doing this, we have a pretty good system in place and a really nice kind of selection of competitions that can appeal to people of all different, technical levels and different positions through their curriculum. So, excited to see you guys excited about this. And I'm sure we have a lot more people that are excited because I really feel the excitement every time we are face to face with this. And we're going to circle back to that idea as we kind of move through this presentation a little bit. But I just think it's so neat to see all of these college students from all over the country coming together. And what did it for me, like 20 years ago when I was on the other side of this, was kind of getting this realization of, outside of my university and my college and my department and my organization, there are so many other students that are passionate about this stuff and connecting with the professionals and the academics that are making this happen. And it really was inspiring to me. And it's one of those things that I came out of it and I was like, man, I didn't even know how much I don't know about this, right? But now I kind of know what I need to know to be successful. We really strive to have both academics and professionals working on writing the problem statements and evaluating the problem statements and talking to the students and things like that. So I feel like it's a really good exposure, and that's why I've done this for all these years. So I'm going to talk for just a minute about the 2022 USITCC in general, and you've probably already seen this information, but then some just kind of overarching tips about participating in the competitions. And then we'll drill down into each specific competition just a little bit and talk about what to expect there. And then, of course, stop me at any point along the way for questions, but we'll devote some time at the end. But yeah, if anything comes up, let me know. I'm pretty easygoing on that type of thing. So, of course, the USITCC 2022, after a 2-year break, will be at the Wyndham Riverwalk in San Antonio, 1 year and 1 week from today. So I think you've seen this slide before. Of course, we are right on the Riverwalk, which is a lot of great restaurants and attractions and bars and music venues and things like that. So a very appealing location. And in fact, Lauren, you mentioned going to an event in Amarillo, which probably a regional event. My first competition event like this ever to attend was the Region 3 conference, which was in San Antonio, right on the Riverwalk. We had a great time there. So a very nice location near the Alamo, the Market Square, a lot of great places to eat and shop and things like that. So cool location, and look forward to seeing you guys there. As far as the competitions go, so we back in 2019 had these 9 competitions, and you can find more information about each one of these on the website usitcc.com/competitions. And everything that's currently on the website, and whenever we make updates, I always put a timestamp and try to kind of change log what has changed. So the information that's out there now is a little bit stale at this point, but it's going to be updated soon to reflect our 2022 competitions. But similarly, everything I say in this presentation today is kind of subject to change as well as we work on solidifying the schedule and the competition roster and things like that. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be a lot of good information and a lot of good guidance. But at the website, there's kind of general description of the competitions, the instructions, what types of resources you need, any specific rules, things like that. So be sure to check that out periodically as you are preparing for the event. And one thing that I know is going to change at this point is we're actually going to be moving, for various scheduling reasons and resource reasons, from these 9 competitions down to 8 competitions, as we're going to be merging the general application development and the mobile application development into one competition. And you'll see what that looks like on the schedule shortly. But then one really nice thing that is present on the website are these past problem statements. So all of the problem statements from the 2018 and 2019 USITCC are posted on the website. So you can download those ahead of time and go through the problems, practice, create the solutions, and that should give you a little bit of familiarity and make you a little bit more comfortable with what to expect when we're back face-to-face in 2022. So a really great resource there. Overall, the competitions are in 4-hour blocks. So I think we'll probably be something like 8 a.m. to noon, then 1 p.m. to 5, and then 6 p.m. to 10. Something like that's kind of generally how that lays out. And most of the competitions, you can either be an individual competitor or you can be in a team of 2. And then the 2 exceptions to that are PC troubleshooting and security, which are both individual competitions. They have a qualifying exam element to them, which is kind of a single player thing. So then when you get to the final round, you're just still your single player. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we look at those 2 competitions specifically. But overall, you can have a team of 2 for most of the competitions. And that's something I kind of recommend because it is nice to be able to bounce ideas off of one another and kind of teach each other things and things like that. So 3 kind of general tips, general guidance that's going to apply to all of the competitions and perhaps to just your life in general. I think number 1 may be most important, and that is don't freak out, right? It may get overwhelming at times. There's a lot of people there. The room gets kind of crowded and noisy sometimes. It's going to be a big, complex problem statement, probably much more than you see on your final exams or anything like that. And it's easy to get overwhelmed, but take a breath, relax, stretch out a little bit. Don't freak out, okay? We're gonna have more depth on this in a minute. Tip number 2, be careful about how you manage your time. And then tip number 3, if there's something you don't know or you're not sure about, look it up, right? You've got a lot of resources at your fingertips. You can bring any printed materials in, digital materials. You have access to the internet. So if there's something you don't know how to do, you have the opportunity to kind of teach yourself or look it up over the course of these 3 or 4 hours and get something done. So I think good suggestions for the competition, good suggestions for life. So to go more in depth on number 1, don't freak out. You should know going into this that the problem statements are designed to be difficult, if not impossible, to complete in this 4-hour window. They're really big, they're really in depth for the most part. And one of the reasons for this is if you think about it from the perspective of the judges and the people that are evaluating the submissions, we're going to have these competitions on Friday, and then by Saturday, we have to know first, second, third place, any honorable mentions, and have this awards banquet. And grading and evaluating things takes a lot of time. And for some of our competitions, we have upwards of 70 or 80 submissions. So if we were in a situation where we had 10 teams that completed 100% of the problem and they all did a really good job, it gets to be really hard to pick out what's first place, second place, third place. Whereas if no one completes it, all the way through, you can kind of filter on, well, here's people that got less than half of it done, and here's people that got more than half of it done, right? And then start looking at those better submissions. And it may be that first place or second place only completed maybe 70 or 80% of the problem, right? So when you leave, even if you didn't get everything done, don't think that that takes you out of the running or anything like that, because that is certainly not the case. It's pretty rare that we would have any teams completely complete any of our problems. So something to keep in mind there. Also know that the competitions are very intense before and during the event, but then there's a lot of relief at the end, right? And one of my favorite things to do is, while everyone is queuing up and the queues get this big and gnarly, is to just kind of walk through the line and walk through the crowd, and there is so much nervous energy and excitement and just kind of pin up, man, I'm ready to get in there and design a database or do my VB coding or whatever. And then, you get at this table of other people who are all raring to go, and everyone's getting connected. And some people are having problems getting connected, and we're going to walk around and troubleshoot and make sure that everyone is able to do their thing without letting any technical problems get in the way, right? It gets very intense, very intense. But then as everyone is leaving, almost every time, there's a lot of smiles coming out on the other side. It's one of those things that, man, I really kind of got pushed. We try to get people out of their comfort zone, make you reach and make you stretch to be able to solve these problems. And this is what I said earlier, and I've heard this echoed so many times in various ways of phrasing this by students coming out, and they're like, man, I really thought I knew about network design, or I thought I was really good at designing databases, but holy smokes, then I see this problem and I realize there's a lot of stuff I don't know. But then I started looking it up, and now I know what I need to learn. I know what I need to know in order to be successful next year, or in order to be successful on a job interview or in my career or whatever. So, this is one of the things that I really hope happens as part of these competitions, is not just that students have an opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge, but also that they come out of the competition knowing more than they knew when they went in. And that's one of the reasons I think it's important that we have kind of a mix of academics and a mix of professionals who are putting together these problem statements and running the competitions, because there is a real world flavor to what's going on in the competition. So that's, I think, a kind of cool aspect of the whole thing. So, when you get the problem statement, take a deep breath, relax, decompose the problem, and work efficiently. And decomposing a problem, I teach database at the University of Houston, and this is one of the things that I go through with my class a lot, to take this big problem that has, maybe 15 or 20 or 30 different function points or smaller problems, and break it up into more manageable chunks and do those one thing at a time, right? Because if you've got a system and the problem statement says, you need to be able to log in as a regular user or an administrator, and you need to be able to run these 4 reports, and you need to be able to enter data, and administrators need to be able to create new users and assign security rights. That sounds like a big complex thing, but what it really is a series of smaller, less complex problems, right? Like user logging in, admin logging in, creating one report, creating a user, and you just tackle those things individually. And then at the end of the day, it kind of comes together to be something bigger than the sum of the parts, right? So decompose the problem, work efficiently. You can have, if you're a team, you can have one teammate working on one part of the problem while the other works on something else or researches how to do something, right? And, most of all, have fun, right? Have fun, have a good time, challenge yourself, and come out of there having learned something. This is not a life or death situation. It is something that, you're out there to kind of show your skills and test yourself, and it's a neat experience. So, don't.
And Mark, I would add
Yeah.
that we find that it's helpful to actually have one strong team member and one who's not necessarily as strong, maybe a year younger, because the problems can be decomposed, and you can have somebody working on the tougher parts and somebody working on the more basic parts at the same time, and the younger one learns for next year.
Yeah,
That's the real key aspect.
that's a great recommendation because yeah, if you're developing a form or something like that, maybe one of you is working on how do you get the data out of the form and into the database, while the other works on the design of the form, right, or the layout of the application or something like that. And then yeah, like you mentioned, Fred, that's kind of a mentoring thing where when the older student graduates, well, then the younger students now the senior, and they get to kind of tutor and mentor someone else. So yeah, great suggestion there. So as far as time management goes, and again, important in competitions, important in life, I would suggest arriving at the contest lab maybe 10 minutes or so early. There is going to be a very long line, right? So don't let that throw you off. The fact that there may be 150 or 200 people in line in front of you. One thing I will point out is that due to the way our check-in system works, it actually speeds up the process a little bit if you line up with other people from your school, from your university, because as we check you in, it defaults back to whatever university was checked in last. So if we've got 5 teams from the same university, it's kind of bang, 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 and they're done, as opposed to having to look up the university each time. So kind of a tip to help us out a little bit. But yeah, these lines go way out the door. And then as you actually get into the lab space, we have usually 4 of these check-in systems set up here. So on the monitor facing you, you'll see exactly what the person who's checking you in sees, which is the name of your university, the name of the people on your team, and the competition that you are participating in. So they'll ask you to make sure everything's spelled right. This is how you want your name to be printed on the certificate if and when you win. And when that happens, a little ticket gets printed out right here that has information on how to connect to our contest server to get the problem statement and also submit your solution, as well as a username and password that you use to authenticate, right? So that's kind of like your key to be able to access the contest server. But with these 4 stations set up, we can process about 10 teams per minute. So if you were to get into this line and there's 200 people in front of you, well, that's probably about 100 teams. So we'll process that entire line in about 10 minutes or so. So we start the check-in process, maybe 5 to 10 minutes before the contest start time so that we can try to start as close to on time as possible. But even with that in mind, there is some other administrative stuff that we need to take care of once everyone's checked in. Any general announcements or rules that are specific to the competition, directing people to the restroom and the fire exits and things like that. So, and also as we go around and do some tech support and try to make sure everyone is connected and not being held up by technical issues, expect that the competition may actually start maybe 10 or 15 or 20 minutes past whatever the advertised time is. And I've had people in the past get really freaked out about that and go, oh, we didn't have the entire 4 hours. And it's like, well, this is true. However, everyone in the room had the exact same amount of time. So, everyone had 3 hours and 45 minutes. It's still an even playing field there. So, fairness is something that's very important to me, and making sure that we all, all have a similar experience. So we do strive to that. And we will make periodic announcements on time when you have like an hour left, 30 minutes left, 10 minutes left, and then kind of do a countdown for the last couple of seconds. And yeah, again, as far as time management goes, it's funny, as I was putting this together, I was like, man, on every slide, I'm saying you got to decompose the problem, but that's what you got to do. It's a good time management strategy to plan out what you're going to do before you start doing it, right? because you got to know what you're going to do before you do it. If you just start hacking code the first minute you walk in there, you're going to wind up not very efficiently using your time. So like Fred had mentioned, splitting things up based on people's areas of expertise. I've seen teams come in with, a more senior student and a more junior student, or come in with someone who's really good at developing an application and someone who's good at databases, or someone who's good at graphical design versus someone who's good at doing the programming. So a lot of different ways to think about how to structure your team. And then kind of calling back to tip number one, don't freak out, keep your composure, and just keep pushing forward. And really kind of related to that is tip number three, which is if you don't know it, look it up, right? You have internet access and you have, 3.5 to 4 hours that if you don't know how to do something, you can use that time to kind of teach yourself, or if you don't have the right software, the right packages, download and install that. Don't just throw your hands up in the air. I have a couple of times seen teams like in the application development competition that they'll get maybe 20 or 30 minutes in and they start packing their stuff up. I'm like, guys, what's going on? What gives? What are you doing? And they're like, well, we don't know how to connect our VB app to an Access database. And that's something that we've got to do for this. And it's like, well, why don't you spend like 30 minutes looking it up, right? There's like sample connection strings on the internet. There's sample code, like figure out how to do it and get it connected. And then you might have like a winning submission if you do that. But worst case scenario, you come out of here knowing how to connect an application to an Access database, right? And you know more going out than you knew coming in. Like, you've set aside this time for this competition. So try to learn what you can. But yeah, full internet access. You can bring in your notes and slides from class, books, things like that. The only thing that is really off limits is communicating with anyone outside of your group, right? So you can't be chatting with your buddy or posting on the forums or Stack Overflow or anything like that. It is an individual effort, but yeah, any resources that you find online or that you already have are all totally fair game. And then another great suggestion is, since these problem statements are posted online and you've had the opportunity to work through the problems, well, year over year, the problems are often, kind of in the same kind of genre of deliverables, right? I mean, it's not, these don't drastically change year over year. So if you've worked through the past year's database problem or app dev problem or whatever, bring in what you did in your practicing and refer back to that and go, man, when I had all the time in the world, when I was working with my teacher or my buddy, like, how did we solve this problem? And, use that as kind of some direction for how to solve it, when it really counts. And then, yeah, don't freak out. Just keep not freaking out through the entire thing. Keep focused. You can do it. So that's kind of my general rules that apply to everything. And now, unless you guys have any questions about that, maybe we could drill down into each of our competition events specifically. So here is our kind of tentative schedule. And as we've developed our core of, or our corpus of competitions and schedules and things like that, I kind of envision this as being 3 tracks. And it's not that you have to stick to any one of these tracks, but this is just kind of how I try to pair them up, because I feel like people that do database design and application development and systems analysis and design, like, you might want to compete in all 3 of those. So I try not to schedule those to be at the same time, because these are all 3 kind of developer-oriented competitions. And then similarly, network design, PC troubleshooting, and security, I kind of think of those as being more infrastructure related, where you're looking at, server and client and network configuration. And then these two competitions here, more of kind of data analysis and data manipulation with our Microsoft Office competition and business analytics. So Friday morning, we have database, network, and Office. Then Friday afternoon, app dev and PC troubleshooting. And then Friday night, systems analysis and design, security, and business analytics. Okay, so certainly you don't have to stick to a track. You can mix and match and do database design, PC troubleshooting, and business analytics. But this is just kind of how I conceptualize these fitting together. And there's always someone that wants to compete in both like database and network, right? And there's just not really much we can do about that. I mean, we have to have contests happening at the same time. So, pick the baby you love the best. So I'm going to kind of go through these in chronological order, starting with database design. So typically this is kind of a two-part competition where you're going to have a business case or a story, which usually is, I don't know, somewhere between a page and a half to 3 pages describing what type of database you're going to need to design and create. So a big part of this is being able to draw an entity relationship diagram. Typically, it's either, crow's foot or chin notation, but whatever you do, have all the appropriate grammar for your attributes, for representing cardinality and participation, things like that. So drawing the ERD, typically you'll need to create the DDL or data definition language code that goes along with the ERD. And then usually, and I don't know if this is going to be the exact format going forward as we kind of change things up, but once you've designed the database, then so everybody's kind of working from the same starting point, there'll be a database provided for you where you will be, or at least the DDL and some insert statements to create the database, where you'll have to answer a bunch of questions, doing your select from where, maybe doing updates, things like that. But you'll need to be doing joins, subqueries, aggregate functions with group by, like all of these, all these core things that you learn in your relational database course. So there's the conceptual design, the physical design, and then querying the database. Sometimes there's additionally some kind of multiple choice SQL or database knowledge questions that are used as kind of a tiebreaker. So yeah, but if you've done a relational database course as part of your undergrad, that should put you in a pretty good position for this competition. It will be very helpful to have access to some type of database management system to get data into and run these queries. So if you're currently taking a database course, you may have access to an Oracle or MySQL or MySQL server, something like that. Or you can often install these on your local machine, run like the developer version or a free version, something like that. And that's, I think, a real kind of easy and low risk way to be able to interact with the data, because if it's on your local machine, you're not dealing with network connectivity issues or anything like that. So do keep in mind you'll probably need a DBMS that you can interact with. And this is some of the or part of a submission that went from a statement a couple of years ago, and you see there's what, about 9 tables or so here in the ERD, 10 tables in the ERD, and some gerunds decomposing many-to-many relationships, different relationships, things like that, some DDL code, and then some queries that kind of go along with it. So this is generally what your deliverable for the database design competition might look like. Any thoughts, questions, or concerns about that? All right, so moving on to the network design competition, also on Friday morning. So the general directive typically is that you're going to be designing a network for some type of enterprise organization. Depending on the problem statement, it may have more focus on designing the local network or their wide area network. There's been increasing interest in integrating some cloud aspects into the network design. So LAN, WAN, cloud, that type of thing. Often there's a lot of specifications around how many offices, where they are, what the size of each office is, right? So it may say, you're a multinational company with offices in, Houston, San Francisco, and Singapore, right? And you've got 4,000 users in Singapore and 500 in Houston and 1,200 in San Francisco. Everyone's got a desktop computer. There's 50 printers per office, X number of mobile devices. They have this type of bandwidth, things like that. And designing a network to accommodate those needs, designing or sometimes redesigning a network to accommodate those needs. So typically there's different levels of network diagram that would be required, describing the type of equipment that you would purchase to do this. And sometimes you're provided with a pricing sheet. Sometimes you're instructed to just, go to Cisco's website or EMC's website or whoever it is you're going to be using and get the pricing from there. And then kind of justify why you chose this solution, right? Because if you throw hundreds of millions of dollars at a problem, well, yeah, you can come up with some pretty cool solutions, but you're actually not going to do very well in this competition if you suggest a solution that's going to cost $50 million when really you could have gotten by with $1 million solution, right? So you've got to have some justification for what you're doing, appropriate bandwidth, appropriate hardware. There have been years when it's been and I don't remember if this is a core component or kind of a bonus add-on thing, but what would your configuration on your Cisco 2960 switch, look like? What are the options that you would provide to be able to do this type of VLAN tagging or whatever it is that needs to be done. So a lot of possibilities there, and we have a team, diligently working on their network design and coming up with something like this, where we have kind of a high level network design showing their WAN connectivity and the budget of what different pieces of hardware and how much they at least think that this is all going to cost. And this certainly doesn't have to be perfect, because the costs that you find online are all going to be either estimates or subject to negotiation and things like that. But just showing that you have kind of a reasonable approach or a reasonable estimate to what you're going to need is kind of the goal here. And then for our final Friday morning competition is the Microsoft Office competition, which usually upon hearing this name, people are like, Office, like, oh, this is just kind of a joke competition. Like this can't be. I know how to make things bold and italicize things, but that's not at all what this is about. And if you, I see head shaking going on, because yeah, if you've used the Office suite in depth, it's there is so much it can do. It is really a magical suite of software tools. So yeah, don't sleep on this. Don't think that Office is a joke. It's going to be a big, again, complex kind of a description of a business case that you'll use really all of the core components in the Office suite, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Access to solve, right? And it might be something like, hey, your local municipality is planning out a big fundraising spring festival or something like that. And so you've got logos of all of the sponsors and people that are going to be setting up booths, and you've got an Excel spreadsheet that's got contact information for all the people in the town and all your sponsors and exhibitors, and you've got to get that data out of Excel and into Access and run these reports, and then use that to do a mail merge so that you can send out to everyone and have the appropriate logos on the top of the documents and things like that. It really it gets to be a big and complex thing where we're using all of these different tools in an integrated and interconnected way. So yeah, you'll come out of the Office competition going, huh, I didn't know Word could do that. That's kind of cool. A lot of good stuff there. Did one of you do the Office competition in the past?
I heard
Yes.
You've heard?
I heard just from the previous members that when we were planning on, so before it was canceled last year, the seniors that had gone the year before were like, by the way, Microsoft Office, that is not what it looks like. It's not like,
Yeah.
It's not, because on paper you're like, oh, that's probably the easiest, or oh, that that one I probably have the most knowledge going into it. And they're like, no, like pump the brakes. That is not at all what you think it is. And so I had heard about that from the previous attendees, that they were, that was their words of wisdom, like pretty much what you said too. Like, this is not making text big, red and bold, for sure.
You have to have a deep understanding of how they all interlace and everything, and how to navigate that UI in order to sort out what you need to sort out. It's really not like one, in my opinion, that you set out to finish. You just do as much as possible and you turn in what you have at the 4-hour mark. That one is extremely difficult. I would say one of the more difficult ones, because I did app development, and I think the Microsoft Office solutions was harder than app development.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. That it kind of flips, to the naked eye. It looks like, oh, I think this one might be the easiest because I probably know a lot about this going into it, and then by the end you're like, I don't know anything about Microsoft actually.
Microsoft Office, yeah.
It goes a lot deeper. It goes a lot
Where's
deeper.
Clippy? I need help, Clippy.
Yeah,
Save me.
that set the tone for the entire competition when I went. Whenever I first, because it's required with freshmen. If you do they take. We usually try to take everybody that's in the club, because we don't have a ton of members in that, and most people can't make it usually. So we only usually take about 10, maybe 12 members. But that one was difficult. That was like the first one I've ever done. That was my first exposure, and it was the hardest one I've ever done since.
Trial by fire. But
amen.
On the flip side of that, and I think this is all true what you're saying about the difficulty of it, it's also kind of one of the more accessible competitions, or one that, because if you don't know C# or Java or whatever programming language, you just can't do application development, right? If you don't know SQL, you just can't do database. You can't even get started. But at least with Office, like, you can get something done and get that forward momentum. And I think that's actually a good tip for all of the competitions. And again, this kind of goes back to decompose the problem and don't freak out, but do something, right? Just get the smallest little thing working, and then that momentum will kind of build, right? And you get one little thing working, then two little things working, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, we've done like 10% of the problem. Like, man, maybe we can do this.
And I would point out the Microsoft Office suite probably has more help online than anything else there is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it takes looking it up. The answers are out there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's Access that I hit the wall with, because at that point, Access was the thing that ended up was the wall for us. But that's mostly because I had never worked in Access before that. But Excel and sending that in slides and Word was easy. But once I hit Access, I was like, oh, I have no understanding of Access.
Yeah. And
I got pretty far, but not as far as everybody else.
And all the online documentation is great. And then also all of the Office related classes that I've taught or taken in the past, there's that, you've probably had the same thing, that really thick spiral bound, like 800-page workbook thing, right? That has great step-by-step instructions for doing, mail merge or importing, exporting into Access, things like that. So you might have to pay the extra baggage fee to bring that with you, but it's a good resource.
Yeah, and I will say that although it is challenging, another thing that I heard was that it's also like I think Lauren mentioned, that it's really rewarding, because you're kind of humbled, and then you also learn a lot more about the different functions that are available within Microsoft Office.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's
I would say I also
software suite.
I also find myself quite often after this competition students tell me we didn't know how to do this, we didn't know how to do that. And I say, well, how many others do you think actually knew all those things?
Yeah, great point. All right, cool. So that wraps up our Friday morning competition block. So moving into Friday afternoon, we have application development and PC troubleshooting. So app development, this competition has been over the years kind of one of our biggest areas and movement of change, or biggest competitions of change. It has kind of movement and differences every year. We have in the past had a separate Java competition. We have had different COBOL and RPM and mainframe based competitions. We've moved from C++ to C# to a general .NET application, different types of web development competitions, a separate mobile competition. And we're trying to kind of change, or we're not trying to, but we are changing this a little bit every year, kind of getting the best fit for the state of technology currently. And so what we're doing this year, or at least the current plan, is that you can kind of choose your language between Java, C# or VB.NET. And we are probably going to be integrating in an option, but not a requirement, to make your app as a mobile app, which would run either in an Android or iOS emulator. Yeah, we used to have a separate mobile app competition. Now we're kind of integrating this in because we think that's something that might provide some value. So kind of choose your programming language here, but regardless of what language it is, the general expectation, and this is if you think about what all you can do when you write a program, reading and writing to files, parsing XML and CSV files, things like that, being able to manage users and logins and security, things like that, showing different options based on the level of permissions a user should have within an application, generating different types of reports. Database connectivity may be something that's important, right? If you need to create a local access database, or sometimes we've had hosted like Microsoft SQL Server databases, things like that. But a lot of options there. And again, anything that you don't know how to do, I don't know how to parse an XML file. Well, look it up. There's a lot of documentation out there about parsing text files. So again, decompose the problem. And even if you can't get all the way through it, even if you can't get through much of it, one thing that I've seen be very or looked upon favorably in the judging is to have the framework there, right? So have the structure of all of the major function points of the application, and then start building out the functionality of each one of those function points, right? So, maybe you've got your menu with the 8 different options of things that need to happen. And maybe 6 of those 8, when you click on them, it's just like a feature coming soon, landing page or something like that. But then for 2 of them, you've actually got something that works. And even if you have something that doesn't work completely, right? Get it in there, because if you don't turn that in, it can't be evaluated. But, again, people seldom get all the way to the end of any of these problems. So, it very well may be that your submission that only does 50% of what it's supposed to would actually be a real contender. So, get it out there to be evaluated. And then our second competition in our Friday afternoon slot, one of my favorites, PC troubleshooting. So this starts with a 1 hour or up to 1 hour qualifying exam that will have roughly 100 questions. And we usually have somewhere in the 150 to 200 people competing in this competition range. So we have, a bunch of competitors come through. Generally, the exam does not take the full hour. Most people complete it in, maybe 20 or 30 minutes, something like that. And we just kind of cycle people in as, seats fill up. And as people get done, we fill them in. And one of the really neat things about this competition is it is automatically graded in real time. And then we've got a big leaderboard that gets projected up on a screen in the contest lab lobby. So I'll show you that in just a moment, but that's a really fun atmosphere. And then from the qualifying exam, the top 10 scores go on to this 1 hour hands-on final round where we have VMs running and you get credentials and the access to get to the VM. And it's been broken in a lot of very weird and tricky ways, and you've got to fix it. So that goes on for an hour, and then your solution to how you fixed all these problems gets evaluated. So this is what the leaderboard looks like. So as people are taking the exam, you can see here these first couple of people have completed 73 to 79 of the 100 questions, so they are all the way through. But then we've got some people here, he's only on question 94, question 89, question 85. So as they answer questions correctly, they move up in the list, and the people who are at the bottom of the top 10 get bumped down. Okay, so everybody kind of huddles around here and is watching the leaderboard, and there's a lot of like cheering and oohs and ahs. And where the competitors are actually taking the test, you can hear what's going on. And so someone will click an answer, and then you'll hear everyone go, yeah, and they're like, oh, did I just get that right? Did I just get it wrong? I don't know. But you see the people kind of moving up and down, and it's a really neat thing. So once everyone has completed the qualifying exam, these top 10 people will go on to the final. Oh, that's weird. And ironic that it would be in the PC troubleshooting competition, because this is the type of problem you might have to fix, right? Your top 10 people go on to this final hands-on round where I give you credentials to a virtual machine, and it might be problems with the operating system. There might be issues with the applications or application configuration, with the networking. We've had VMs in the past that had malware on them that had to be cleaned off, or different kinds of security issues, or just generally acting weird. So this is a really fun competition, and yeah, I think a really cool one. So very popular because we have so many students wanting to do this. This is why we have to have the qualifying exam as kind of a filter to get down to the top 10, because I just simply can't host 150 VMs for everyone to start hacking on. So that is, and one of the neat things about this is because it is so big, we do have first, second, and third place, but then all 7 of the other 10 finalists get recognized as an honorable mention in the awards banquet. And so everyone gets a certificate to take home at least, or their medal and trophy at most. So it's a cool competition. I like that one. And then that leads us into Friday night, where we have systems analysis and design, security, which is another really neat one, and business analytics. They're all really neat competitions, actually. But so systems analysis and design is really just like what you would expect from your systems analysis and design coursework. You'll have, like many of the other competitions, a 1 to 3 page story describing a system that needs to be designed. And then you'll come up with all of your either object-oriented or structured engineering kind of design for like what the system needs to do, and also mock up some application screens to kind of walk through all of the different features and functions and kind of some documentation. So this is some content that I pulled out of a previous year's submission, where they've documented all of their function points and preconditioned and descriptions and stakeholders and things like that. And then they have their UML diagram here, and then have mocked up what this would look like as a mobile app, right? So yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say about a systems analysis and design competition, but this is kind of the general gist of that. We also have our security competition, and this is one of our newer competitions, and something that, kind of like PC troubleshooting, has garnered a lot of interest over the past couple of years. So it also has a pretty high volume of participants coming through. So again, we have a qualifying exam. This one, again, up to an hour. It's usually not quite as many questions, maybe 50 or 60 questions. And then the top 20 or 25, depending on kind of how we have the final round structured, goes on to a security capture the flag, right? And so I'm not sure if you're familiar with this terminology, but this is a security competition where there's a number of flags that you capture by doing various things, right? So if there's a web server, for example, that has a SQL injection vulnerability, if you can exploit that SQL injection vulnerability, then the web server is going to give you back some string of characters, which will be pretty clearly marked as being the flag. And then that flag is basically a password that you give back to the system to let it know that you have completed that objective, right? And then you get credit for that, right? Or it might be like decoding some encoded string, right? Or accessing some hidden system files or something like that. So the top, some number of people from the qualifying exam go on to the capture the flag portion, which generally lasts, depending on how it's set up, 1 hour to a couple of hours. And you can use really whatever tools you want in pursuit of that. I see a lot of people using Kali Linux. Typically, you'll have a USB boot instance for Kali Linux, and they boot off of that, and then they've got all of their security tools there, or they'll run that in a VM on their laptop or something like that. Certainly not required, but a lot of helpful tools kind of all packaged together there. This dude was just super stoked about being in first place coming out of the qualifying exam. So I always like this picture here. But with the flags, and this is from a couple of years ago, I described a couple of these as using like SQL injection, or maybe cracking, or guessing a weak password, or decoding a string, or something like that. I thought this was really neat. So for this particular flag, this is an IP connected power strip. So this power strip is running a little web server, and you can connect to it and individually turn on and off any of the power outlets. And this is something that you'll commonly see computers connected to, like in a small data center, so that if a server is like hung, an admin can connect to this and virtually unplug the server and plug it back in, right? Kind of a last-ditch effort of getting something back online. But anyway, the flag was that you had to connect to this power strip through whatever vulnerability there was, and turn on this outlet that had this siren connected to it. And so periodically through the thing, you'd see this red light start spinning, and the woo woo, and everybody would, oh man, someone else got that flag. So that was a really cool thing. And they also had a physical security element to it, where you could come up to the lock picking station here and practice your physical security skills. So some neat stuff there. And over the years, we've had both these kind of physical elements and things that are just strictly software based. So anything is fair game in this final round of the security competition, and it winds up being a lot of fun and very intense. So cool stuff there. And then our final competition that we're talking about is business analytics. And so as you might expect, and of course, business analytics is a very hot topic in a lot of business schools today, but you'll be provided with, I'm just going to say, lots of data. This could be anywhere from a few 100,000 up to several million records of data, may all be in like one table or one file, or it might be kind of separate pieces of data across a lot of different tables in a database and files that you have to kind of consolidate and bring together. So we've had this as CSV files. We've had the data loaded into a hosted database. We've distributed like exports or backups out of MySQL and Oracle servers that you could put into your own local instances. So when it gets closer to competition time, we'll disclose how the data would be distributed. But lots of data that you have to do some analysis on, doing some basic statistics, inference and predictions, doing some visualization and graphical representation of what's going on. Really neat competition. The company that has been sponsoring this competition for the last couple of years, I'm not sure if they are going forward or not, but I certainly hope so. But they deal a lot with colleges and academic placements and college applications and things like that. So they have provided us with a lot of really neat data where, you've got hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of college applicants, and then these hundreds of colleges and their previous admission statistics and things like that. And so being able to match up students to colleges, or tell a college what students they should be recruiting based on the success of students they've admitted previously. Like, these have been the kinds of questions that have been addressed with this. There's also been some things like where should we place this store in this city based on the demographics of the people that live in the area, and other stores that are in the area and things like that. Some kind of GIS type questions. So a lot of really neat questions that come up in the business analytics competition, and really neat and useful analysis and reporting that comes out of this. And from many, if not most, of our competitions, including the business analytics competition, there have been cases where, people that have done well in the competition, this has led directly to hiring. And I think we had a couple of people come out of the business analytics competition with internships at the company that was sponsoring this. So, a lot of cool stuff and opportunities there. So that's kind of an overview of the 8 competitions that I'm pretty sure are going to make up the 2022 USITCC. Generally, we recognize roughly around the top 10% of submissions is kind of the way this works out. So first, second, and third place, and then some number of honorable mentions. So if we had 50 teams participating, 10% would be 5 that would be recognized. So first, second, third, and then 2 honorable mentions is kind of the broad guideline. Now this kind of, can go a little bit more or less in either direction, but that's typically kind of the number that we expect there. And then first, second, and third place get a nice medal, and then a kind of an acrylic trophy here, as well as a certificate. And many times the sponsoring college likes to hang those certificates in a trophy case or something like that. And then honorable mention all get certificates as well. And of course, recognition at the awards banquet, and, a very nice line for your CV or resume. So we do have a nice...
and Mark, some of the sponsoring companies will offer cash awards or Xbox or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. There's, sometimes some little supplemental prizes and things like that, above and beyond the potential for internships and hiring and things like that. But yeah, we've had Xboxes and iPads and all kinds of stuff, and cash, all kinds of things that have come along with the awards. But yeah, everyone gets recognized at the awards banquet, which will be a Saturday luncheon this year. But yeah, we call everyone who is going to first, second, third, or honorable mention kind of comes up and lines up, and then we do the whole 3, 2, 1, and your winners are type thing. So it's a really nice situation there. Get your awards, and then photo ops. And here are just some pictures of some of our past winners. But we've got the nice backdrop and professional photographer doing all the shots. A lot of times this is something that is really nice for your university to have, because when students win at competitions like this is of course something that your college and your department and your student organization is going to want to brag about. So we always have a press release that comes out after the conference, but then also can provide this type of imagery to you to do in your own press release. So a lot of very happy and excited winners here, and yeah, a lot of very happy and excited people that have helped put this show on. So there's also the possibility that during your time at the conference, you may not be just 100% involved every minute at the competition. So of course, there are other things to do, like go around and talk to our sponsors, who often will have booths and tables and things like that set up in our common area. They may be hiring. They usually are hiring. In fact, that's why they're there sponsoring stuff, or they've just got something cool to say, or, a cool technology to show you, or, nice swag, pins and cups and stuff that they'll give you. So go around and talk to our sponsors. We also have breakout sessions and speakers that are often very interesting. So you can get some good learning there and make some good connections there with real, professionals in the real world, as well as networking with one another. And like I mentioned at the very start of this, that aspect of it, and understanding that, wow, there are a lot of people that are just as passionate about technology as I am. Because in my major, there was, 50 or 60 people in the major, but then out of that, there were like 20 people that were in our student organization. But then out of that, there were like 5 of us that were like super amped up about doing this thing, right? And so I was like, oh, I'm like one of 5 people that's super amped up about this. But then I get to the conference, I'm like, oh no, I'm one of like 800 people that is super amped up about doing this thing, right? So, this whole networking opportunity for, both at a personal level and a professional level is a really cool thing. And, get out and explore San Antonio, have a little bit of fun and cultural experience and all that, because as Gary said in this morning's session, there is value when we get together as people. And I very much look forward to getting together as people again in 1 year and 1 week from today.